Hi friends, welcome back to Complete Medical Coding, a complete CPC learning channel. Today, let's move on to Anatomy Part 5. Let's discuss about some human body structures. First, let's look into the structure of the skin. Few questions from the integumentary system, few anatomical questions you can expect from this part. So let's see the structure of the skin. You can just look into the picture. What are the structures of the skin? What are the parts of the skin? Epidermis, you can see dermis, sebaceous glands, sweat glands, subcutaneous layer, melanocytes, everything. Let's discuss. Okay. What is epidermis? Actually, there are 3 layers of the skin. It's epidermis, dermis, and subcutaneous layer. Epidermis is the topmost layer of the skin. Dermis is the middle layer and subcutaneous is the innermost layer. Okay. Epidermis is the topmost layer of the skin. It has no blood supply, but it's nourished by the blood vessels in the dermis. So dermis is the middle layer. It's the thickest of the skin layers. And it comprises of a tight, sturdy mesh of collagen and elastic fibers. What about subcutaneous layer? That is the innermost layer. I have mentioned it at the end. You can see it's subcutaneous layer because it's the innermost layer of the skin and it's located under the dermis. It consists of connective tissue and fat molecules. Subcutaneous fat acts as a shock absorber and heat insulator, protecting underlying tissues from cold and mechanical trauma. So these are the 3 layers of the skin. Now, apart from the layers, you can see melanocytes. Melanocytes are the cells producing melanin, the pigment responsible for the skin tone and color. Melanin is the pigment which is responsible for the skin tone and the color. And this darkens the skin. If you have more melanin, it means your darker skin. If you're darker skin, it means you have more melanin. Okay. And this darkens the skin and protects you from the strong sunlight. The darker the skin, the more melanin you have. Now, sebaceous glands. It's located around hair follicles and they are a part of, they are of particular importance for skin health as they produce sebum. Sebaceous glands produce sebum. It's an oily protective substance that lubricates and waterproofs the skin and the hair. Now, sweat glands. It's a long coiled hollow tube of cells. You can see in the picture sweat glands, the structure of the sweat glands. It's a long coiled hollow tube of cells. The coiled part in the dermis is where sweat is produced. And the long portion, the remaining long portion is a duct that connects the gland to the opening of the skin on the outer surface. And also it opens into hair follicles. Now, hair. Hair has 2 separate structures. The follicle, which is the root in the skin, and the shaft, the lengthy one, that is a shaft that we see. That we are seeing the hair, that is the shaft. Okay. So the shaft is made up of dead hard protein called keratin. The shape of the hair shaft determines whether the hair is curly, wavy or straight. Below the surface of the skin is the hair root follicle leading down to the hair bulb. So below of the hair shaft is the hair root, that is the follicle which leads to the hair bulb, the root of the hair. At the base of the bulb is the papilla, small clump of tissue. Papilla is a small clump of tissue. And the papilla has a network of capillary blood vessels. There you can see a lot of blood vessels that supply oxygen, energy and amino acids which is needed for the hair growth. Okay, so these are the structures of the skin. Now, so we have already learned the layers of the skin, right? Epidermis, dermis and subcutaneous tissue. It's also called as hypodermis, the innermost part of the skin. And now you should learn about the layers of epidermis also. You should be just, be aware of the layers of epidermis, which are the 5 layers of epidermis. Stratum corneum, stratum lucidium, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, and stratum basale. So these are the 5 layers of epidermis. It's illustrated in the second picture. Stratum corneum, it's a dead cells with a hard protein envelope. The cells containing keratin and are surrounded by lipids. Stratum lucidum, dead cells containing dispersed keratohyalin. Stratum granulosum, keratohyalin and a hard protein envelope form. Lamellar bodies release lipids. Cells die. Cells die in the third layer, stratum granulosum. Then stratum spinosum, keratin fibers and lamellar bodies accumulate. Stratum basale, cells divide by mitosis and some of the newly formed cells become the cells of the more superficial strata. So these are just the layers of epidermis. You need to know the 5 layers of epidermis. Okay, so that's it for the structure of the skin. These are some of the important parts where you need to know about integumentary system, about the skin. Let's move on to the skeletal system. Skeletal system, you need to learn about spinal column, skull, and the other bones related to that. So spinal column consists of 3 vertebrae. Okay, cervical, thoracic, and lumbar vertebrae in the spinal column. Cervical vertebrae starts with C1 to C7. There are 7 bones in cervical vertebrae from C1 to C7. Next comes the thoracic vertebrae, 12 bones from T1 to T12. And it ends in lumbar vertebrae, which consists of 5 bones, L1 to L5. These are the 3 spinal columns, spinal vertebral column. This is important. The order you have to remember. Next, move on to the skull part. Cranium. What is cranium? Bones that form the head is called cranium. And which are the bones that are made up of cranial bones and facial bones? Okay, cranial bones and facial bones make up the cranium in the skull. Now, mandible. It's the largest and strongest bone of the face. It helps in chewing and other mouth movements, as everybody knows. Next is clavicle. You can see in the picture clavicle. It's a long, slightly curved bone that connects the arm to your body. And it is also called as beauty bone. Clavicle is called as beauty bone because it's the main important bone in the human body as it connects the arm to the body. Then manubrium. It's the most massive, thickest and squarest of 3 main sternal elements. Scapula. Scapula is also known as shoulder blade. You can see where is scapula located. It's also known as shoulder blade. And it's a bone that connects humerus with clavicle. Humerus is the arm bone. Humerus, I will explain, it's coming. Then sternum. It's also known as breastbone. Scapula is also known as shoulder bone. Sternum is also known as breastbone. It is attached to the collarbone and the first 7 ribs. Okay. Then ribs. How many ribs a human is having? A typical human body is having a total of 24 ribs. But it can vary also. But majority of human body parts contains 24 ribs, 12 on each side of the body. And the last 8 to 12 ribs called as false ribs. The last false ribs, 8 to 12 ribs. They are also called as floating ribs because these ribs do not attach to the sternum at all. These ribs are floating. They are not attached to the sternum. So that's why they are called as floating ribs. The last 8 to 12 ribs from each side. Okay. Then humerus. Humerus is a bone of the upper arm forming joints at the shoulder and the elbow. You can see in the upper arm, humerus. Only one bone is there at the upper arm, that is humerus. and that is forming joints at the shoulder and the elbow. Then comes the ulna and radius. In the arm itself, it comes two bones that make up the forearm. Upper arm contains humerus, forearm contains ulna and radius, where ulna is slightly longer than radius. Then comes carpals and metacarpals. Wrist bones that connects the distal aspects of the radial and ulnar bones to the base of metacarpals. That they are carpals. Okay, so carpals are the wrist bones that connect the distal aspects of the radial and ulnar bones to the base of metacarpals. And there are 8 carpal bones which divides into 2 rows, proximal row and distal row. 8 carpal bones are there in total. Then phalanges. Then comes the phalanges. Phalanges are the 14 bones that are found in the fingers of each hand. Even in the foot also it's called as phalanges. Okay. So phalanges are the 14 bones that are found in the fingers of each hand. How 14 came? Because we have 5 fingers. The 4 fingers consist of 3 parts like distal, middle and proximal, and thumb has only 2. That's how 14 bones in each hand. 14 phalanges. Okay. I mean 14 bones in each hand. In the fingers of each hand. Then comes pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle, it's a ring-like bony structure located in the lower part of the trunk, and it connects the axial skeleton to the lower limbs. Axial skeleton to the lower limbs. Then comes sacrum, coccyx. What is sacrum? Sacrum is a shield-shaped bony structure that is located at the base of the lumbar vertebrae and is connected to the pelvis. It's a large flat bone in the lower part of the spine. Large flat bone in the flat-shaped bone in the lower part of the spine, that is the sacrum. Whereas coccyx is a small triangular shaped base of the bone at the base of the spinal column, formed of fused vestigial vertebrae because it's functionless. Vestigial vertebrae, that is. So sacrum is a shield-shaped flat bone, whereas coccyx is a small triangular shaped bone, okay, at the end of the pelvis part. Then femur. Femur is a bone of the thigh articulating at the hip and the knee. Bone of the thigh is called the femur. Patella. After femur it comes the patella, that is called as a kneecap, knee bone, okay. The bone at the front of the knee joint and it's the biggest bone in our body. Which is the biggest bone in the human body? It's patella, knee bone or kneecap. Then tibia and fibula. Tibia and fibula are the 2 long bones located in the lower leg. Same like the hand, in the forearm there is 2 bones which are called as ulna and radius. Same like that in the foot, it is tibia and fibula. Okay, in the lower leg, where tibia is the larger bone and fibula is the smaller bone. Then comes tarsals, metatarsals and phalanges. Tarsals are several short angular bones that make up the ankle. Then comes the metatarsals, bones of the forefoot that connects to the 5 phalanges. 5 metatarsal bones numbered from 1 to 5 from hallux, also called as great toe, to the small toe. So another name for great toe is hallux. Okay, so 5 metatarsal bones. Then comes the phalanges. It's similar like the in the arms, in the hand. Long bones in the foot located distal to the metatarsals. Each foot has 14 phalanges. Thumb has only 2. So like that, not thumb. In the foot it is great toe. So like that, 14 phalanges. So that's all about skeletal system. Next, let's see the bones of the skull. Which are the bones of the skull? Cranial bones. You already learned that cranial bones and facial bones represent the head. So which are the cranial bones? There are 8 cranial bones in the human skull. 8 cranial bones. Frontal bone, it's unpaired. Parietal bones, it's a paired, means two parietal bones are there. Then sphenoid bones, again unpaired. Ethmoid bones, again unpaired. Temporal bones are paired one, so two bones. Then occipital bone, which is unpaired. So like that there are 8 cranial bones. One frontal bone, one parietal bone, two parietal bones, one sphenoid bone, one ethmoid bone, 2 temporal bones, and one occipital bone. So these bones represent the 8 cranial bones in human skull. You need to learn how many. You need to remember how many cranial bones are in the skull and if it is paired or unpaired. Okay. Next, let's move on to paranasal sinuses. I think in the respiratory system, I had already taken paranasal sinuses. I had just shown a picture of which are the 4 sinuses. Let's learn once again. Paranasal sinuses, there are 4 sinuses. Frontal sinus, ethmoid sinus, maxillary sinus, and sphenoid sinus. Frontal sinus are 2 large frontal sinuses in the frontal bone, which forms the lower part of the forehead and reaches over the eye sockets and eyebrows. You can see in the picture frontal sinus. See, there are 2 frontal sinuses in the frontal bone and it forms the lower part. It is present in the lower part of the forehead and it reaches over the eye sockets and eyebrows. Then comes the ethmoid sinus. Ethmoid sinus, it is found in the spongy ethmoid bone in the upper part of the nose between the eyes. So first comes the frontal sinus, then comes the ethmoid sinus, which is present in the upper part of the nose between the eyes. It's lined with the cells that make mucus to keep the nose from drying out. So it will produce mucus. Then comes the nasal cavity. After that, it comes the, in between the nasal cavity, it comes the maxillary sinus. The third sinus is the maxillary sinus. It's a 2 large maxillary sinuses, one in each of the maxillary bones, which are in cheek area next to nose. So after ethmoid sinus, it comes the maxillary sinus in the cheek area next to the nose. These also help in producing mucus that help the nose from drying out. Next comes the sphenoid sinus. 2 large sphenoid sinuses in the sphenoid bone, which is behind the nose between the eyes. So sphenoid sinus is a sinus which is behind the nose, but it is between the eyes. These are also lined with the cells that make mucus to keep nose from drying out. So these are the 4 functions of 4 paranasal sinuses and their functions. Okay. So friends, that's all for today's anatomical part. Let's move on to the other body systems, body structures in the next anatomical session. So stay tuned for more videos. If you like the video, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much and bye. See you in the next episode. Bye.